President Trump's mission in Venezuela has caused an absolutely vintage left-wing head loss.
Are not allowed to invade foreign countries and kidnap the president. It doesn't matter how awful he is. It doesn't matter whether or not he tortures kittens or pulls the wings off butterflies.
Well, that's James O'Brien's view. Let's cross to Venezuelan refugees in Argentina. The fruitcakes over at your party are signing a petition, yes, a petition, to demand that Starmer condemns President Trump. Let's have a look at how Venezuelan refugees in Panama are getting on. Jeremy Corbyn's piped up.
This is the behaviour of a cowboy state, not the behaviour of a member of the UN Security Council. So it needs to be condemned in the strongest possible terms.
Let's just check in with how Venezuelans who fled to Chile reacted. Zahra Sultana said that Trump won't stop with Venezuela. This is imperialism and it needs to be condemned in all its forms. Well, lefties also held an emergency online rally for the people of Venezuela. I'll tell you what, that'll show Trump, won't it? Mr. President, we need to stop. Zahra Sultana and Richard Bergen are holding an emergency online rally. Let's just see whether or not Venezuelans think that this is imperialism and that it needs to be resisted.
Because before I was even born, there have been struggles. My family has been fighting for so many years. Before I was even here, they have told me about it. They told me about a time where democracy existed, and now I can finally look forward to that.
Alistair Campbell and Florence of Belgravia himself, Rory Stewart, did an emergency podcast. What do they have to say?
My big hope, this is the moment Europe and its democratic allies wake up to the threat posed by the US.
By the US?
By the US.
From the US. Should we just check back in again with the Venezuelans? Nobody for me embodies the snivelling left-wing Islington-style bubble more than Lewis Goodall, who is finally allowed to show his true colours after being unshackled from the BBC. He had a caller onto his LBC show called Sam. Now, Sam is an African man. Sam thinks Trump is right, that colonialism was actually quite a good thing, and he wants Trump to do what he did in Venezuela to parts of Africa. Sam has lived experience. Lewis Goodall is not an African man. He has no lived experience in that regard. The only stuff he knows about this subject comes from the things he's read in the rare moments he's not looking at himself in the mirror and pouting. But Sam was Lewis's worst nightmare. Here's what happened.
Many are claiming that Trump is recolonizing Venezuela. If recolonization by Trump means peace, stability, and prosperity, so be it. I would like Trump, in fact, to extend his hands and go to my native Africa. Many of the countries in Africa today, failed states. They are sinking under the mountain of corruption and population explosion. This is causing a crisis that is driving millions to come abroad to look for a better life. We need to be recolonized.
Of course, Sam, many would argue, including lots of rather eminent historians and economists, among others, that it is colonisation, and European colonisation, that was at least a significant part of the contemporary political problems of many of the states that you were talking about.
It is the opposite.
Really?
If Africa was never colonized, where would we be?
Well, there were plenty of countries that weren't colonized. Japan wasn't colonized, and they're doing all right. Well,
they're doing all right, but not Africa.
Right. Well, there are countries which were colonized that are doing well, and some that weren't and aren't. I'm not sure.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm talking from personal experience.
Yes,
I was there when the British were there.
I mean, America quite literally had a colony in the United States, in Africa, called Liberia, which has had plenty of problems. So I'm not necessarily sure that recolonisation will do terribly well.
What has happened since the American and the British left Africa? In chaos.
Right, OK. Well, Sam, it's a view, and grateful for it. Let's turn now to Lisa Smart, who is a Cabinet Office spokesperson for the Lib Dems, of course. Lisa Smart, won't ask you about
Classic, isn't it? Shuts him down, cuts him off. Hilarious. Look, don't get me wrong. I've got no idea how things are going to turn out in Venezuela. None of us do. Time will tell. But there is one establishment left-wing liberal elite narrative, and it's that Trump is bad. This whole thing is bad. It's a form of colonisation, which is bad. It's against international law, which is bad. And that's the only view you're allowed to have. Again, though, with that in mind, let's just check back in with the Venezuelans to see how they feel about it.
This interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN and their New Year deal. New Year, new VPN. And a huge saving of up to 80% if you act now. You're busy planning how to get in shape, but the hackers are planning how to get into your accounts. ExpressVPN locks down your connection so you can start the year protecting your data. This offer ends on the 7th of January, so scan the QR code or click the link in the description now.
Well, let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and Reform member, former Tory party chairman Sir Jake Berry. Well, Carol, that was one catastrophic left-wing meltdown, wasn't it, really?
Goodall is just so funny. He couldn't cope with that, could he? No lived experience whatsoever. Sam completely trashed him. Anyway, good man, Sam. It's interesting to hear all the lefty crazies today screaming about how terrible this is for Venezuela. Where were all these crazies when Venezuela's economy was going down the toilet? Where were they when people were being starved and tortured? Where were they when dissidents were being killed and never seen again? Where were they then? Why weren't they shouting about Venezuela? You know, you got Corbyn shouting, we stand with Venezuela. No, he doesn't stand with the Venezuelan people, because we've seen what they're doing. They're partying, they're having a good time. He stands with that, the Marxist despot tyrant Maduro. So that's the people. The people like Goodall. You've got people like Zach Polanski today screaming for Trump to do something. You know, you can only come to the conclusion that these crazed leftists want that kind of socialism in this country. The kind where, if you don't do what you're told, you're sent to a prison and never seen again. The kind where Britain becomes an economic basket case, and that's where this socialist government is pushing us.
I think, Jake, there's a bit of a juxtaposition there, isn't there, between you kind of classic Islington elite lefties and the reality of Venezuelans. And it's almost like the Islington elite lefties feel as though they know a lot better and don't really care about what locals actually feel.
Well, they're clutching their pearls, aren't they, shouting, you know, this is all about international law, this is about people and freedom. And whatever you think about Trump's actions, the former president of Venezuela was a brutal and vile dictator who refused to be bound by democratic elections, in fact overturned the most recent set of democratic elections in Venezuela, and according to America, and I'm sure they're correct, was cooperating and collaborating with the importation of narcotics. They've described him as a narco-terrorist into the United States. Undoubtedly, the world is a better place. Now, President Trump has removed this vile, horrible dictator from this failed state. Where I do have some concerns, and I don't think it's the same concerns as those Islington lefties you're talking about, is let's see what America's plan is for what comes next. Because in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, the failure of American, in that case British intervention as well, was a failure to plan for what's next. And that's what we should be focusing on for the Venezuelan people.
Yeah. I'll just say, you know, kind of quite catastrophic head loss from a lot of people on the left don't seem to be factoring in how the Venezuelans actually seem to feel about it.
Well, clearly this man was an illegitimate president. He lost the election, he was impoverishing his people, and he was corrupt. But that isn't the whole story, and I think it is incredibly dangerous for people to offer President Trump a blank cheque to just go in and abduct a foreign leader like it's some kind of Deliveroo delivery. It is not a safe thing to say that he can just do this without consequence when he could then do it to Greenland, a NATO member as part of Denmark. I also think that he has done this in a gleeful way without any plan to fix the regime. The regime is still in power in Venezuela, it's just that the head of it has gone. And so this may turn turn out to be incredibly dangerous. If you look at Afghanistan, Iraq, at so many examples, it has fallen apart. I also think there is a certain hypocrisy of President Trump doing this, because he came to power saying that he was not going to get involved in foreign wars or intervening. And I think the reason he's done this has got more to do with oil than a concern over communism.
No. This Maduro is, as we've been called, a narco-terrorist. And we know that he was importing drugs and illegal immigrants into America. He was actively encouraging illegal immigrants to go to America and cause dissent. So the oil might have something to do with it, but he has a right, as I see it, to actually tackle these people who are in his own backyard. Venezuelan politics, nothing to do with us, doesn't affect us, but it does affect Americans.
Yeah, we're going to come on talk about the actual international law aspects of this in a little bit and ask whether or not, frankly, it's dead. You know, is international law over? If it is, it's a terribly bad time to be led by an international law fanatic. So there we go. But
don't you think people in this country are looking at that and thinking that they wish that Starmer had a little bit of the
cojones?
The cojones, that's a good word.
Maybe go over to France.
The one I was going to use, because if he had a fraction of Starmer, of Trump's ruthlessness, he could stop illegal immigration in a second.
We are being led by a weak, irrelevant little man, and that is going to become increasingly obvious as this saga develops. And indeed, we are going to be talking about that at 10 p.m. But look, I mean, when it comes to the kind of reaction that we've seen here, Jake, I think one of the things that stood out for me is that people like James O'Brien, Lewis Goodall, Zara Sultana, all of those kind of Jeremy Corbyn, I think what it says to me is that they would have rather had a vile narco-terrorist, corrupt, murderous, kind of left-wing communist/socialist fanatic in power. They prefer that to President Trump.
Yeah, look, all of their commentary is borne out by a hatred of President Trump. I mean, I think, frankly, President Trump could, post everyone in, any country around the world a $50 bill or a $100 bill, and they would say it was a bad thing in imperialism. Whatever he does, they're going to say it's a bad thing because they hate him. Frankly, President Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care what these people are saying. And look, any intervention internationally that upsets Jeremy Corbyn, Rory Stewart and Owen Jones has got to be the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah, Rory Stewart. I mean, gosh, Florence of Belgravia himself there, really. I mean, what a man. They had to do an emergency podcast.
Blows in government with Rory.
But isn't it?
Yeah. And, my sort of...
He was Floods Minister, I believe, at the time, for a period of time.
Well, he was First Minister, he was Prisons Minister. I just think when he was... he's made this brilliant career after politics about lecturing people about what politics should be like. He wasn't very good at it when he was doing it himself, so I'm not really sure why we should listen to him.
The general consensus from a lot of people, and Rory Stewart is not here to defend himself, but the general consensus of Rory Stewart was that he was a bit weird. I mean, do you remember when he ran for the Tory party leadership, he did that weird squatting thing and had that bizarre tash? I mean, very strange man, but, obviously he's got morals and principles, which is why he does a podcast with Alistair Campbell. But just coming on to that quite famous clip, it's gone absolutely viral, that Lewis Goodall clip, where you've got an African man there who's got lived experience, who's got a view on this kind of stuff, and Lewis Goodall, that's obviously no match for a left-wing know-it-all, is it?
But look, Rory Stewart is not the threat to the world. Donald Trump is more of a risk to safety and peace in this world than anyone on that podcast. But I just think that I'm amazed that it seems that overnight there has been a rewriting of what people think is acceptable. For 2 decades, we've had people saying that Blair was evil for trying to get rid of Saddam Hussein, who was an evil dictator that murdered millions of people, Kurds and Iraqis alike. Are we now saying that it is acceptable to just go in, have regime change, and maybe take the oil in the process? If that's the case, be honest about it. If it's not, I think we're setting a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, look, well, we're going to return to this at 10 and take it from a probably more serious angle, to be fair, than getting stuck into what we've just done there. Talk about international law. Is it dead, really? Are we out of touch now when you look at the way that the big powers are acting? Are we a big power? We'll talk about that, Starmer's position in it all. But